Well, hello, everybody out there on the internet listening, and welcome to the very first Ricecast of 2022. Dr. Pastor Willie Rice.
Happy New Year.
It's the new year.
It is. Holidays are over, and we're off and running in 2022.
2022 is upon us. Everything looks different in 2022. You know, you're looking around, and you're like, 2021 version of all of it's gone, and this is the new one. We're all going to be writing this year incorrectly for several months. Have you done that yet?
Well, you know, it's funny. You used to do that a lot when you wrote letters and you wrote checks, none of which we do anymore. So I don't know that I actually have any place to write the year.
It's gotten to a point. Have you been in line somewhere?
But now that you say it, I filled out a form yesterday, and I'm sitting here thinking maybe I wrote 2021.
Yeah, you probably did.
I need to go back now because the government will be coming after. It was one of those tax things you have to fill out. Probably end up in jail or something.
It's gotten to the point with the checks where have you been in line at the grocery store and somebody gets out their checkbook and you get out of line because the process of paying with a check at this point.
People still do that. Like I do have a checkbook and but it's now, you know, it's like I used to go through that whole little wad of checks, you know,
right.
Like 50 checks. You go through that every 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's like I use like 10 a year.
Right.
You know, it's
That's
like
probably right.
Where is those checks? And you pull them out. Where are those checks? And where are they? Anyway, you just they last a long time now.
You get a lot of life out of the one checkbook. If maybe you're a millennial like me, you do a quick Google. Where am I supposed to write everything on the check exactly? How exactly do I do the check? But I was at Target or something recently, and somebody did a check, and the process is you got to give them an ID. Yeah, you got to give them three forms of address.
About somebody at this point, it's like it's really.
They got to call references. Yeah. Hey, they're trying to pay with a check. Do you know a Barbara? It's insane if you're trying to pay with a check. More power to you. But we are in the new year. It's exciting time. What a great Christmas season we had, Pastor.
I think it was so special because a lot of people around here remember 2020 was, a lot of COVID stuff was going on. I know it's still going on, but kind of a different type now. But we lost so much in 2020. And that I think there was my wife had COVID during 2020, you know, so we were.
That's right.
You know, there was a lot going on. So in 2021, everything was special. You know, that first Christmas Eve service, I found myself tearing up in the first song. You know, it was like I'm so grateful to be here. And all the Sundays and the music, it just reminded me of how special it was. So thanks again. Big shout out. So many people work so hard to pull that off here, from our facilities team to our tech crew, people that are behind the scenes. But if they don't show up and do what they do, it doesn't matter how good somebody sings or how good somebody preaches. I mean, they make it happen. So they really, really worked very, very hard, and it was a very special season.
A great season. Just an incredible time. I hope you got to spend some time with your family or loved ones. We know that there's still, so much going on with travel, and I even just getting into doing this podcast, I was thinking it is. You do kind of have to. We're still doing this COVID thing. You have to kind of go like, man, it's. Surely, when you go back to the beginning, you think you're going to do it for 2 weeks, a month, maybe 3 months at the worst. And here we are.
Yeah, it's amazing we're still dealing with it. And, of course, we've done a lot of podcasts on COVID. Now it's affected us. And we've said many times we don't pretend to be medical authorities, which really makes us about smarter than 80% of the people talking about it.
Just by saying that.
Because we said that. We have a little humility, And however, the good news of it, the bad news is right now the numbers are spiking again. The good news is this variant doesn't seem to be as serious. Yep. But again, as always, at this point, we're just telling people govern yourselves accordingly. There's plenty of information. We're not shutting down. We're not changing anything. thing. We think everybody can get vaccinated who wants to be vaccinated.
Yep.
We're not getting in a fight over that. We're do what your doctor tells you to do, and use your own best judgment there with all the medical advice. Encourage you to make good decisions. But if you're sick, stay home. If you're around somebody who got sick yesterday, maybe stay home. Make sure you're not sick. Just be smart and take precautions and protect other people as best you can and yourself. But the good news is most people who get this latest variant are not getting seriously ill. And, we're grateful for that.
Yep.
But at the same time, we're mindful that there are people who are sick.
Absolutely.
And so we're very sorry for that and praying for them. And hopefully, maybe this spike will soon dissipate. But at this point, we're just like, there'll be another one coming. I just don't know if this isn't a new normal for a while. Viruses like this do tend to mutate, and just like the flu is part of our life.
Right.
We all of our life have dealt with the flu virus.
Right.
We know it's out there. We know you could get it. If you're sick, you should stay home. And maybe this is just going to kind of be our life now, that we understand there's a COVID virus out there, and we just have to, continue with life, and we have to connect with each other. We are made for, we've talked about that, we are made for relationships. I think sometimes the what people are doing might be worse than the disease, their attempt to avoid it. We need to connect. We need to gather. We need to worship. And I'm so grateful for our state, and I'm grateful for our area where we can do that, and our freedoms haven't been curtailed. And yet at the same time, be cautious, be careful, and if you're sick, stay home.
Yeah.
Just do whatever somebody said, whatever you used to do during flu season, that's what you should do.
Sure.
And with maybe a little heightened awareness. So I think that's kind of where we are.
Absolutely. And I little tidbit in there you said about relationships. We had a special guest speaker here at the Clearwater campus this last Sunday who touched on that, talked about how, this life, this Christian life is meant to be done together. Guest speaker by the name of Stephen Rice.
Yeah, we had 3 campuses, as you know, and all of our campuses had different preachers.
Right.
At Seminole, our Pastor Tom was able to preach, and Danny at the East Lake campus, Pastor Danny. But here at the Clearwater campus, Stephen was preaching, and it was great to have our son back home. And really, I hope that our church family, the Calvary family, thinks of him as a son of Calvary, because he is. And so it was great to have. I loved his opening line. He got up and says, "Great to be home, the church that discipled me," and I thought it was a great line. And but he was a great kid. We always joke about the various things he got into trouble on, but he really was a good kid. He never went through a rebellious period like you see with some. But he did occasionally skirt the parameters of acceptable behavior. So occasionally we had some moments, but. Anyway, it was really great to have him back. I thought he did a great job. We're really proud of him. He's part of a church plant that we're supporting in Gainesville, Florida, Salt Church, which we've sent a lot of our students up to Florida, and they go there. So it was great to have him back home.
Yeah.
And if you were at our other campuses or you were not here, that's the message that we streamed, and therefore that's the message that's online.
That's right.
And so we, happy for you to, if you go to our Seminole campus or our East Lake campus and say, I missed that message, then certainly you can catch it on our website or social media platforms.
It was a great Sunday across all of our campuses. I'm glad you brought that up. Tom and Danny spoke, and I'm sure they did a fantastic job. I host online, as some of you know, so I was watching Stephen. And just going into our podcast today, I thought I might wanted to just ask you just about that moment. Yeah, because you're looking up and there's your son, who's now a father, just had his first baby, and he's up there and he's preaching here at Calvary. Just wondered if you might talk a little just about that moment. What was that like for you watching him?
It's a great moment. You just kind of enjoy the moments, but you don't think about them in the moment. You're executing the service,
right,
and you're
right.
you're listening to him, and you're doing all the things you have to do in the moment. It's more when you think back on it and you think about what a significant moment. Of course, he's preached here before, but this was the first time since he became a father, and something about now that he's gone away and he's in a ministry and he's, doing his thing and serving the Lord in his environment, and then coming back. It was special, and we're watching him grow as a communicator, as a preacher, and as a man, and so you watch that change happening as you get better by preaching. You get better,
right.
But like anything else, you just do it a lot, and so you're watching him take really huge strides and his ability and his confidence, and but we're really proud of him. He's a strong. We're proud of all of our children, of course. But Stephen, just to watch him grow and to watch him embrace ministry, that was never something we pressured or tried to steer him to intentionally.
Right.
But something that the Lord drew him to, and so it's a special moment. I appreciate you recognizing that. I tell you what was a really cool moment was a couple months ago when he asked me to speak at the SALT Network, which is their college ministry there, and so it was a Thursday night, sometime a couple weeks after Amos had been born, and so I didn't know this, but he introduced me, asked me to come speak. So we were up in Gainesville, and he brought his baby up on the platform. Little Amos was a couple weeks old at that point, and held his son as he introduced me. And that was just a moment. You're like, this is a moment. I remember listening to him introduce me and just standing on the platform thinking, well, now this is a real moment.
Yeah.
You don't script this. You don't get this much in life. This is one of those rare moments, and so it was a special thing. Over Christmas, we had one of those pictures with my dad, who's still alive, of course, and me and Stephen and his son. So 4 generations of Rices there, and you think about it. I mean, it's not completely uncommon today, but because people, we live a little longer than, say, 100 years ago. But
right.
to have 4 generations is not something that happens every day.
Yeah.
And until the birth of Amos, it's not something that would have happened in our family. 4 generations of male, firstborn male. It's not something that would have happened in our family, I guess, not in my lifetime, because I never knew my grandfather on my father's side.
Right.
He died when my dad was a young man, so I never knew him. So this Amos's birth, there's 4 generations, and it's just a special moment. Special moment.
Yeah, it was very sweet. Glad you brought all that up about if you missed it, you can watch it on our YouTube channel. It's also available on the Calvary app. You can always get caught up on It'll also be the podcast. It'll be on the podcast. If you're listening to the podcast, it'll be the one on there, because that's where we pull is from the Clearwater campus. But we are in a new year. I thought we'd talk a little bit about just the new year, and people set out and they have resolutions. I guess that's the first question. You got any resolutions you're going into this year with?
I don't really do the resolutions thing. I do think New Year's a good time to take stock of various things and to set some goals. And maybe that's the same thing as a resolution. You're always looking at things, my schedule, your health, got to lose some weight, got to do this, got to do that. And you make some decisions. So I guess I do. But really, I talked to our staff yesterday about what I call big rocks.
Yeah.
And it comes from an illustration of where if you have a container and you're trying to put big rocks and then pebbles and sand in the container, if you start with the sand and the pebbles, you'll run out of room for the big rocks. But if you'll start with the big rocks, then you'll have room for all the pebbles and all the sand. You can get much more in a single container. It's an illustration that people have done. But the point of that is, what are the big rocks? Like, what are the big priorities that you need to start with first? And so, we had a staff exercise this week where we just did, and you were in there, like, what are your big rocks personally in your area? And then what are the big rocks for our church? And I do jot down some of my own big rocks.
Yeah.
These are the big things that in the next year I need to run after. And so I do have a list of big rocks.
Yeah. Oh, it's great. I was going to give you credit, too. I think, because we've been doing the podcast for a while now. I think it was a couple of New Years ago. It was just a bit of sage wisdom that you dropped, and I'm not sure if everybody caught it. But you said if you make something like a fitness goal or something like that, tell some people very close to you, but don't go telling everybody, because then every time they see you having a donut or something, they're going to be like, "Wait, didn't you?" So you know what? Just keep it close. Keep it close. Screw.
I don't even remember giving that advice, but it's there's truth in that. There is the adage that if you're going to do something big, tell some people, and that holds you accountability. That's accountability.
Right.
I just wouldn't boast about it.
Right.
Okay. There's a difference between, hey, I'm telling people it's what I intend to do.
Yeah.
But just don't have a lot of pride when you do it, because there's a difference there.
Right.
There's a difference. I think it comes to the boastful pride that's going to get you. That becomes like Peter saying, "I would never deny you." Yeah, probably soon. It's the boasting that it would have been okay if he said, "I hope to never deny you." That would have been fine. But it was the boastfulness that caught him.
Yeah,
because you will. Again, there's a whole, you could talk about resolutions, the idea of set reasonable ones, set things that are reachable and measurable, and don't set things that are so extraordinary that, if you're inevitably going to fail, and then you're going to get discouraged, and then, you're the same. Set some marks that you can hit, and just a couple. And even if in one area of your life, whether it's health or finances, you have goals in every area. But just, what are the big rocks? Don't give me 10. Give me 3.
Yeah.
Give me 3 big rocks, and what are you going to do to achieve success? And I think resolutions are a good thing, because they show people that are wanting to change and the idea that we want to grow and get better.
Yeah.
That's a good thing that people have that aspiration.
Definitely. And definitely that you have hope that you can get better,
right,
that things can get better. It's a great time for that. But you did a message on December 26th, actually before the new year, where you talked some about just a approach, or maybe a mindset. You gave 3 really good questions to ask as we go into the new year. So I thought, here we are now, a couple of days into the new year as we record this. Thought we'd go back, especially the first one is great, because a question that probably a lot of people don't think about when they're thinking about making a resolution. But the first question you asked was, "Who will I serve?" Which is just kind of funny, because it's counterintuitive. A lot of times you think your resolution is going to make it better for you. They're again not out here condemning that necessarily. It's good to try to continue to grow. But I thought that was a great question. Who will I serve?
Yeah, the message was the last in this series from Colossians 1, and we were talking about how do you find your greater purpose in the next year, because that's really what will make this year better for you, that you have a better purpose, that you have a greater purpose, that you're living for something beyond just yourself. And so that makes us, okay, now we start thinking about, as you said, not just things that improve myself. If you really want to improve your life, it's just you need to step back and ask, the first question is, who am I going to serve? Where's there going to be significance in my life? Whose life am I investing in to make a difference? And we don't usually start there, as you said, in resolutions. So I think that's the place to start, is where are you making a difference? If you weren't here, would you be missed? And the answer is, if you're not serving someone, if you're not making someone else's life better, then you probably wouldn't be missed. It's like you wouldn't be missed. So the way to not be missed is to add value, to say, man, I'm going to do something so that if I'm not here, it wouldn't get done. I'm going to do something. Where am I serving? And I would just encourage everyone to think through, hey, how am I serving? How am I making a difference? Where am I volunteering? If not at church, it's somewhere else. But find your place to serve someone else.
And I love you had a point under there where you talked about as you start to think through that, thinking about God's purpose, thinking about how am I serving God's purpose? I think you dropped the Blackaby line in there somewhere about figuring out, I don't remember that quote exactly.
Well, Henry Blackaby was an author back. I think this was really hot. I want to say like the 90s. It might have been the late 80s. I don't know. It's several years ago now. And that Henry Blackaby wrote a book, Experiencing God, and it just took off across our network and churches outside our network, all across the country. It became known for this Experiencing God workbook.
Yeah.
And It was at least the 90s, maybe early 90s. It was probably one of the best-selling Christian books for a while.
Yeah.
And the biggest takeaway from it was people wanted to, were asking, hey, what's God's will for my life? That was kind of the question. And what we didn't see is how, in fact, that really is kind of a self-centered, myopic view. Like I'm seeing what's God's will for my life. Like my life's the big deal.
Right.
And what God's trying to do is, hey, I care, but my life's a big deal. And he said that the reason we're getting bad answers to those questions is because it's a bad question. The question is really that should be asked is, what is God's will? And what Henry Blackaby said is, find out where God is working and go join him. And it was a great line because instead of just sitting there like, what is God's will? He said, why don't you open your eyes and say, where's God working?
Yeah.
Now go get involved in it.
Right.
Go make a difference. So I think that's a great line for discovering whom you're going to serve.
Right.
And because, again, there are a lot of ways to serve people, and almost all of, there are many, many great ways to serve people, most of them good,
Yeah.
But if you really want to be part of an eternal purpose,
Right.
look at where God is working and look at where the intersection between God's purpose and the people's needs are around you. At that intersection.
Yeah.
And you know what God is doing. God is in the world exalting Jesus, drawing people under the authority of Jesus. So we know what God is up to in the world if we believe the Bible. Now, where does that purpose of God intersect with needs around me?
Right.
Now, go make a difference.
Yeah.
Go there and say, okay, can I do this? Can I do that? Can I lead a class? How do I serve? How do I bring my gifts, my abilities, and talents into that intersection of God's purpose and people's needs? And you'll find a way to serve somebody. And nothing will give you a greater purpose quicker than serving somebody else.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love the way you ordered these. So that was the first one. Who will I serve? If you're making notes or you want to jot that down, that was the first question. Who will I serve? The second one was, how will I grow? Now, this is a little bit more in line with your traditional New Year's resolutions. Maybe some of you are in this now. Shouts out to everybody who's 4 days into their Bible reading plan, batting 1,000.
Yeah, my favorite meme was somebody had a guy who was the Book of Genesis was his name. He said the book, and he was like New Year's Eve. He goes, "Hey, man, I got to get some sleep. Tomorrow's a big day for me." Yeah,
everybody start at the beginning.
Had a big day. Yeah.
But how will I grow? Maybe you made some of these. The Bible's one I think we'll touch on, I'm sure, in this section. But how will I grow this year? So we're talking about looking at, jump in here if I say this incorrectly, but we're talking about looking at your spiritual life and how will I
spiritual disciplines.
Growth.
Like, the point of resolutions is you need to grow. You need to change. You haven't arrived yet.
Right.
None of us have crossed the finish line. And, high five the Father. I don't know if we get to high five the Father. But, we've not crossed the finish line. High fiving Peter maybe or something, and hey, we finished. That day will come. It's far more magisterial than I just described.
Right.
That we will cross the finish line. But therefore we've got to grow. We've got to press on. We've got a race to run. And part of that is personal spiritual growth. Paul wrote in Philippians, work out your salvation. He wasn't talking about getting saved or that we earn God's love or grace. We know different.
Sure.
But what he was saying is that when God works in you to save you, now work it out. Work it out. Get stronger. And the most important habit, there are a couple key, we could talk about lots of spiritual disciplines. There's some great books on spiritual disciplines. But if you just said, what are the most important, I'll say this, what are the most important two disciplines? Connecting to God's people. Number two, connecting to God's Word. Because spiritual growth always flows out of those connections. It's as simple as that. Show me a person that grows spiritually, and I will show you a person who, A, was connected to God's people. That is, they were involved with church, however church looked like. Might have been a small house church, might have been a huge mega church, but they were involved with God's people because spiritual growth is as much caught as it is taught. You learn things by being around people who do things.
Yeah.
Most of what we've learned in life was not in a classroom. You didn't learn to speak English in a classroom. Now, you learned grammar. You learned how to speak more proficiently.
Right.
I'm trying not to use bad grammar there. You learned to speak well in a class, but you learned to communicate because you were just listening to your mom and dad communicate, or whoever raised you. You didn't know you were in English class. You just wanted a clean diaper. You just learned how to ask for food. You learned, and you caught it.
Right.
You caught it. And that's how spiritual growth is very often. You just catch it. You're around people who love Jesus and are following Jesus, and you catch their habits, what they do. So you got to be around God's people. And the second thing is you've got to be connected to God's Word. Spiritual growth happens in proportion to your love for God's Word. And the most important single discipline, again, I kind of include two, because one is gathering with God's people, but the other is reading the Bible. And they kind of are related because usually when we gather with God's people, we are studying the Bible. So there is a connection there. So if somebody said the most important habit is gathering, I wouldn't argue that. I just say, as long as you're reading and studying the Bible somewhere. And if somebody said the most important habit is reading the Bible, I wouldn't argue that, because if you read the Bible, it's going to tell you to gather. So, it's kind of, okay, whichever way you want to go it. But I just usually say those two things. Connect with God's people, connect with God's Word. But when people are coming to church, I will often say the most important thing you can do to grow next year is to read your Bible, because they're already gathering, and I'm trying to spur them on. Don't just listen to me explain the Bible. That's a good thing. We all start by hearing. So hearing your pastor or your Bible study teacher teach is like, that's good. That's really good. Now I want you to take another step, and I want you to learn to read it for yourself. And so that's why we gave several plans for reading the Bible this year. And the good news, Anthony, is even though today is the first week of January, so whenever you're listening to this, first couple of days of January, it's not too late.
Right.
I know there's some, and that's why I like my Bible plan. Mine's one of the resources we put on there. We have several plans, like the YouVersion plan. We have a Facebook group, and then we had the Pastor Willie plan, which is not all that complex. But I've been doing it for over 25 years. I've read through the Bible every year for over 20 years. I don't know how many, over 20. And I kind of like my plan, because some plans are, if you miss 2 days, it's like, oh no, now I got to read 18 chapters in Second Chronicles, and that gets really, I build margin in. Like I build mine on 5 days a week and a couple of chapters. So the reality is there's margin. Like if you took the weekend off or you're on vacation, mine's kind of built on a 5 day a week, and honestly, you could accelerate some. And I divide the year up into 2 month increments. So I kind of have a finish line every 2 months. So that helps me not fall behind. Because if you fall way behind, there's always that guy in December who thinks, I'm going to get my goal. All I have to do is read, 22 Old Testament books in the last week. Well, that's not going to happen. And even if you did it, you probably didn't know what you're reading. It's just too much, right?
Didn't take in much.
But if you have a goal every so often, I have a finish line that I'll cross in February. I'll have a finish line across in April. I'll have a finish line across in June. And that keeps me on track. And I read through the first 5 books of the Bible in January and February. And we did all this at Calvary US /Read the Bible. So I promise you, if you're listening to this and go, I really should have done it, but I didn't start on January 1 reading Genesis, and now I'm way behind. You're really not. You're really not. You can catch up pretty quick. And even if you don't catch up, who cares? It's the habit that matters. So what if you don't read through the whole Bible this year? Like what? Like we're going to bring you out back and put you in stocks? I mean, no. You've read the Bible. I want you to have the habit of reading the Bible, and that's why one of the other plans we put was read through the New Testament this year. Much easier. Listen, you can do that. You haven't started. You don't even have to start on Valentine's Day, and you can do that. Okay. I mean, just start. It's very like 2 chapters a day. You can read through the New Testament and Psalms and Proverbs in a year. So just start. Just start. And even if you don't read through something in a year, well, just read this year. So, but people like goals and like plans. It's still you can still hop in, read through the Bible. And let me just say this on reading. Like, I do read the first 5 books of the Bible the first 2 months. That's part of my plan. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, January and February. I'm read in Genesis today. those are sometimes when people read the Bible, they start out, those are the books that are hardest to get through. And Genesis is kind of fun to get through. You can get through just a lot of stories, a lot of narrative. Then you get to Exodus, it's fun, a lot of story. And then the second part of Exodus is about the tabernacle. Mm-hmm. And that's where people go, they go right into the ditch.
Curtain length.
Because, chapters about how long is the curtain, how big is the table, and you're like, what are they? And, after about 3 chapters of that, and then if you do survive and get to Leviticus, it's like, oh my goodness, every year, and listen, that's why I like to break it up and have these 2-month increments, because you can get through it. You can get through it. I make no bones about it. I hope no one thinks I'm being disrespectful here. Mm-hmm. There are parts of the Bible that are harder to read, less enjoyable to read.
Yeah, sure.
The reason is because there are parts of the Bible, particularly the Old Testament, that deal with civil law for the Jew. It'd be like reading our legal codes. Would anyone love to do that? Read the United States legal codes?
Right.
Well, you're reading some of the civil codes when you're reading like in Leviticus or Deuteronomy, and it's like, what happens? What do you do if you get mold in your house?
Right.
What do you do if you have a sore on your head?
Right.
And they're like, oh wow, well, you're reading the literal civil code of these ancient people. Then some of it is ceremonial law. That is how to do Jewish worship. How big is the curtain? How thick is the curtain? What does the priest wear? What does the priest do? It's ceremonial law. Now, is it good for us to read? I think it is, because the Old Testament is the foundation upon which the New Testament flourishes. And so even though I'm reading through Leviticus, and I have a hard time sometimes applying all that to my life today, it is the Word of God, and it does set up the more you read there, the more you understand who Jesus is and why Jesus is so wonderful.
Right.
It's a foundation on which the New Testament is built. So do it. Just don't spend all year doing it. And if you get bogged down in Leviticus, it's only 27 chapters. Get through it.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
The book of John is coming.
Right.
And that's why I switched to the Gospels in March.
Oh, okay.
I jump to Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and the book of Acts in March and April. Because I want people reading in the New Testament, and I want to, after a few days of Leviticus, I'm really ready to get to the story of Jesus. Right. Believe me. I'm very thankful to get to the story of Jesus, because the law shows me how imperfect I am.
Sure.
So anyway, that's probably more than maybe all the listeners wanted to know, but I'm so excited and energized about getting people to read the Bible.
Yeah.
And that this is a great time to start. Just start.
Yeah.
If you can't read all the New Testament, then read through the Gospels this year. Just get a plan and read the Bible. It's the habit that will change your life.
And so much good in there. You think about the resolutions too, and nobody starts on the 1st because it's a holiday, and then you're really not back to work till the 3rd. So you're not too late. Definitely, I'm glad you said that. No one's too. And there's
I didn't start on the 1st.
Yeah,
is it okay to say that? I didn't read the Bible on the 1st. I watched football. Fire me if you want to. It's like, why? Look, it's not. Don't make it a legalistic thing God's. No. I love to read the Bible. It's a joy to read the Bible. But that's why I do like a plan on 5 days a week, because it gives me margin on the weekends. And if I have a day or two that I'm doing something else, that's okay.
Yeah. And that's all great. I just love to reiterate that, because I'm with you. I'm equally as passionate. I love to see people start to read the Bible. Give yourself some grace. I promise you, you're not. I don't want to say I promise you. Very likely, you're not going to hit 365 days where you just hit every single day exactly what you wanted to read. Give yourself the grace to know that. And I love that you did the New Testament reading plan. Truly, truly, because I always have this hesitancy when I hear people that I know are not, they'll say, like, I'm not reading the Bible much, so I'm going to read the whole Bible next year. And I'm like, I love that. I love that energy. That's a big old elephant to eat, though. Just don't forget. Because the Bible is not a book. It's 66 books.
Right. When I've taught this, the Bible's like owning a library. You have your own library, 66 books. And they are not necessarily chronological, and they do build on one another. But just the Old Testament is organized in sections, not chronology. The sections of it's roughly chronological, but not exactly.
Right.
So it's not like you're reading one story all the way through. So people don't see that; they do bog down, and that's why I kind of made that joke in that message about running running a marathon, which we have some marathon runners, right? I think, aren't you a runner?
I am not a runner.
You are not
Pastor.
a runner. Okay.
I'm not. But we do have some runners.
We have some runners, and running a marathon is a great thing.
Yeah.
But if you don't run, like me, I'm not a runner. So if somebody says, I'm going to run a marathon this year, okay, that's not a bad goal, but you might want to start by running around the block.
Right.
And you know, and then give you like a 3K would be I think, I'm not, like a 3K would be a manageable goal. Not next week if you haven't run, but maybe by the summer. Like, I'm going to work up to a 3K, and I'm not going to try to beat anybody. I'm just going to try to finish. You would work up to it. If you were serious about running a marathon, which I never intend to do, but if you were serious about running a marathon, you would just start. Yeah. You would also talk to people who run marathons. You would try to understand the dynamics of that, and it would be a process. I think anybody who's run a marathon, I talked to a guy the other day who's run several, it would be a process of working up to it. Yeah. And just reading the Bible, think about it like that. Yeah. If you can read the Bible through, we've given you a great plan to do it. Jump in and go. Yeah. That's why the Facebook group that we listed on the website is also a good option. For sure. Because you have people who are doing it with you. And so when you are bogged down in Leviticus, we're not trying to pick on Leviticus, but it's one of the harder books that people have to read, or you're bogged down in the genealogies of 2 Chronicles, where chapter after chapter is about whose daddy was who. And when you're in those, you have people to talk to. And you go like, okay, did anybody get anything out of that today? Or boy, and then you can say, hey, just press through 2 days, you'll be out of the genealogies. Yeah. And here's what I also will say this. When I read through Leviticus every year, or the genealogy, there's some stuff where I'm just like, okay, I'm just reading it. But then there'll be a nugget. There'll be something in there that jumps out at me, and I go, okay, I'm glad I read this. Yeah. Because I saw something I'd never seen before. And, particularly if it drives me to the story of Jesus and the message of the gospel.
That is true. Yeah, you don't want to sleep on some of it. Like, you get the book of Numbers is where you get Balaam and the talking donkey story. So there's good stuff. And even just on the other side of that, you were saying, the book of John's coming. But even once you get through Deuteronomy, you're into Joshua and Judges. You're sort of back into stories. Right. So main point takeaway, if you're not reading the Bible, and that's a goal for you, just get in there. Don't feel like you're going to, impress anybody by taking on more than you can chew. Just start, do a little bit better than you did last year, and go from there. So great word there on how will I grow? Again, second question, if you're kind of jotting those down. How will I grow? First was, who will I serve? How will I grow? And then the last question was, how much will I give? How much will I give? And I loved the kind of the base premise at which you set this point, which was about giving your best, more than giving any particular thing. It's about giving God your best.
Yep. Yeah, what a point on money, although we could talk about it, it's certainly good to be generous. And I would say one of the things you ought to look at is, hey, how am I giving and accelerating my giving? That's fantastic. But when we were saying, how would I give? Again, you're right. The level of intensity and commitment. Like, what are you going to put into something? How much are you willing to give? And the idea came from Paul talking about how he was striving and diligently and working with everything. You could tell he was all in. And if you want a greater purpose, then you've got to be all in. You can't be, when you think, if you get a visual image, you can't be the person that's, sitting back, taking it easy. Hey, just bless me, God. And you need to be the person that's on the edge of your seat, on your toes, eager, serving. God, I want to give everything, because I think you'll find that that's when you're going to receive more. And this isn't about earning God's favor, okay? I'm not talking about salvation. I'm not talking about we can earn it. I don't want to turn around into, again, some kind of legalistic or exercise. What I'm saying is, you got to be all in. You got to be serious. If you're just playing games, if you're just going through the motions, it's like I've said this, people go to marriage counseling. You can tell, and I don't do a lot of marriage counseling anymore. It's simply because of time and margin, and there are other people that do it better than I can. So occasionally we have people like, would you do counseling for us? There are people who do it a lot better than I do. But when I've done that in the past, it's like you can tell the people that want to work at it and the people that they don't. They just kind of like fix me. Yeah. Like walk in, fix me.
Right.
And by the way, fix me without challenging me. Fix me without asking me to change anything. Sure. You can see the guy, he comes in, he sits back, it's kind of like, okay, what's the best thing you got? Like, give me something that will, what he's really saying is fix her. Like her attitude's bad. So like give us something that'll fix her. Or, give me something, fix me. But don't challenge me. Don't change me. Don't ask me to do anything sacrificial. Well, you're not going to fix anything until you come in and you're willing to give, until you're willing to lean in and make a sacrifice and make an input and make a change. So that's the whole point of that. How much are you willing to give? Are you going to lean into this? Are you going to put a lot into this? And we made the joke about you can't take out of a bank if you don't deposit in the bank,
right?
Unless you want to go to jail,
right?
And again, that's not salvation. I know people could get off track on that. God, because in the bank of salvation, we were all bankrupt. We walked in, God gave us everything. But there is a sense, Paul is also the guy that said, work out your salvation. There is this sense of which you're going to be able to make withdrawals only to the degree you make deposits in life. You've got to be committed. You've got to lean in. You've got to try. You've got to invest the time, the priority. Somebody says, I want to grow spiritually, but I don't have enough discipline to get up and go to church every week. What? I got news for you. You're not giving enough.
Right.
You're going to have to give more of yourself. You're going to have to prioritize your time and your habits, or not much is going to happen. Right. You want a better marriage? You're going to have to prioritize some things that you have to change. And you're going to have to work on some things. And don't wait for your spouse to change. Everybody wants to change their spouse. That's the problem in marriage. Like,
right.
Pastor, change him. Like if you could change him, and everything would be better. Well, I can't change him. I'm not even talking to him. He's not listening to the podcast. You are.
Right.
Change you. You can't change him. The only person, Charles Lauer used to say, the only person can straighten out another person is the undertaker. You can't straighten anybody out. You can only work on yourself.
Yeah.
And what is it I can do? And so you've got to give. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
In spiritual growth, you've got to give. In marriage, you've got to give. You want financial health? You're going to have to make some sacrifices. You're going to have to put some time in this. You're going to have to make some hard choices. But if you will give, you will receive in terms of commitment and priority and energy.
Yeah. And I think it's important to have that as the last question, because like we talked about at the beginning, you look at these big rocks for your year. You look at because when you think about how much you give, really you consider that. You consider the cost. And you realize I can't do that for 10 things. If I'm going to give it my all, if I'm going to give it my best, I can't do that for 25 different things.
No. So
what are my big rock things that when I'm heading into this year, you're asking these questions: who will I serve? How will I grow? And how much will I give? And you know that the top priority things. You had a great line yesterday in this meeting you were talking about too, where you said how people make their to-do list. I think you were quoting somebody.
Yep.
John Maxwell, was it?
It's an old John Maxwell line where John talks about priorities, and he said, what comes first? You think about the to-do list.
Yeah.
And some people think big things comes first. Like, and by big, he meant like the biggest, a big project. Big things come first. Then work on the little things later. Some people go, no, little things first.
Yeah.
Because I've heard people say this, do the little things first because you check them off. You get a lot of quick wins, and then you can work on the big things. Some people think last things come first. Like you look at your list, and whatever you didn't get done yesterday goes to the top of your list today. So it's like last things first. And some people, it's squeaky things first. It's like whatever somebody's busting you about. Like they're making the most noise. Somebody's breathing down your neck. It's somebody's throwing a deadline on you.
Right.
The squeaky wheel gets the grease kind of problem. And they love to squeak because they want your grease. So some people say squeaky things first. John Maxwell says they're all wrong. It's not big things. It's not little things. It's not last things. It's not squeaky things. He said the deal is first things come first. First things first. What is the biggest deal? What's the biggest priority? That's what successful people do. They know how to prioritize. So honestly, if you're listening to this, it's probably better that we're a couple of days after the new year, because everybody gets into that, and you don't even know what's going on New Year, and it's whatever, and you're still, everybody's got to lose 10 pounds. Okay, we all get that. Now, let a couple of days pass.
Right.
Okay, let a couple of days pass. Now, here's what I did with my staff. What are your big rocks? And I said 3, 5 at the most. 5 is probably too many. But if you could say, hey, here are 3 big rocks for me in the next season of my life, I want to make sure I'm putting those rocks in the jar first. I promise you, there'll be a lot of room for sand. There'll be a lot of room for pebbles. You'll get more than 3 things done. Mm-hmm. But what are the 3 things that are most important in your life to get done that you really want to see happen? That's the question you ought to be asking. And probably a couple of days after New Year's is good, right? A couple of days after. Because then the new wears off a little bit. Yeah. Now, what do I want to run after?
Yeah.
It's still fresh enough in this year. You ought to ask that question. And when you try to, and the questions in the sermon are helping you figure out what the big rock should be.
Right.
Who do I serve? How will I grow? How much will I give? Mm-hmm. Those are kind of filters that will help you define your big rocks for 2020 to run after.
That's right. That's right. So good, Pastor. So we'll put in the podcast description here that link. We're talking about the Read the Bible link, calvary.us/read the Bible, or you can go in the podcast description. We'll put that there. And the link to this message, we'll put Stephen's message in there as well if you want to check that out. But we're off to a fast start, Pastor, in the Ricecast in 2022. This was a solid start to the year. We were well rested, you could tell. But we thank you so much for listening. We thank you for sharing this podcast with your friends. It's very helpful to get the word out if you would rate it on there's like usually some stars there wherever you're listening. If you could rate it. And if you want to do 5 stars, that's great. I'm not going to stop you. And leave a review. Those are 2 ways that you can help us get the word out about the podcast. And we'll be back again with another episode very soon.